To this show. It is February 2nd, 2022. 2/2/2022. Quite an interesting date. Anyway, let me start by saying that I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. So, today we're going to talk about metamaterials and the metamaterials Torchlight Preferred Shares, MMTLP. So we'll go over some price action, talk about some shares to borrow, new wells, and some spin-out thoughts. Okay. So let's start with some price action. If we look, we see that the stock MMAT ended the day at 174, following 2 days of about 12% gains. It gave up some of those gains from the last day. A lot of it was at the start of the day. There was heavy volume and a lot of selling, as we saw, which resulted in a price drop and then mostly the rest of the day the price was flat there. If we look at the volume, we see that the previous day there was a large volume spike of 31,000 shares. We started the day off with a large volume spike of about 29,000 shares, followed by another volume spike of about 17,000 shares, followed by another volume spike of 19,000 shares, right? All of that served to drive the price down significantly in the first 15, 30, 45 minutes. The first 45 minutes, all of that volume drove the price down significantly. And do we think people sold? It could be that a lot of people, it could be that it was actually basically mostly on short selling. And we see that because of a tweet by KREBSBA2 or NodNarbH. So thank you, NodNarbH, for that info. We see that 10 million shares of metamaterials was available to borrow. So if you short a company, you'll eventually need to locate those shares, and 10 million shares are available for shorts to locate. Interestingly enough, we see a similar spike in AMC in terms of shares available to borrow. So they both seem to be tracking in that way. There was a further tweet that he's actually done some really good work here. NodNarbH basically said, the only institutional investor with over 4.4 million shares of MMAT is BlackRock. We see that BlackRock has 13.968 million shares available. And they probably made about 10 million of those available for borrowing, for shorting. In exchange, they probably got 0.1% interest. Who knows? Great job, BlackRock. Anyway, we also see that BlackRock has a large amount of AMC. In fact, they've got 40 million shares of AMC. And that was probably made available for borrowing there too. All of those shares that they loaned out, that the naked shorts sold, probably in the long run, have very little effect. Thanks to Sleeplant, The Trend is Your Friend, for this tweet, which explains why all of that stuff is a fruitless attempt to try to get people to sell. Sleeplant has said that, hey, we've got some more completion reports coming, and he's talking about wells in the Oregrande Basin. And he said, here's the evidence. I expect a couple more before we're done. Meaning that, hey, there's a lot of oil in the Orogrande Basin. They're going to sell that, and all of that naked shorting is not going to help you. So here's a report, a form form W1 actually that was filed. And if we look at the form W1, we see that the status number is 872572, and they intend to drill all the way down. They intend to drill down 8,500 feet. Well, there's a Form W2 that was filled, and it said, and that's also from permit number 872572, it says they went down 6,478 feet and they don't need to go down anymore. This is a oil well potential test completion or recompletion report. So they could have gone down 8,500 feet. They didn't have to. They just stopped at 6,478 feet because they found what they wanted. Thank you, TrndisuFrnd, for posting that information. So this is good news. People are testing out that Oregrande Basin. They're drilling more wells. They're seeing how much oil is there, and all of that is needed to bring that that whole area into fruition. The people who are spending the money to drill wells are likely potential buyers. For all we know, it's already been sold. It turns out that metamaterials is they don't really tell you if stuff is sold yet immediately. They tend to keep it very close. They tend to keep that information very close to the vest. They, like, for instance, in December 3rd, they mentioned that, hey, they need to drill 4 wells as part to maintain their lease agreement. And the wells were completed on December 13th, but we didn't know that they were completed on December 13th all the way out until January 14th or so, when they issued a statement about the MMTLP shares. And they said, oh, those 4 wells that needed to be completed, they were done around December 13th or so. Good to know. Anyway, so let me ask you a question. Suppose you are a parent company and you've got a subsidiary that you'd like to sell, and there's a potential buyer out there, and that potential buyer has the cash to buy your subsidiary, right? What would happen if you actually sold it? You think that, the purchaser gives you the cash, you give the purchaser the subsidiary. You wind up in this situation where you've got the cash, and then, you've lost the subsidiary, and the purchaser now has that subsidiary. You might think, hey, this is a good deal. But you forgot about your friend the IRS here. They, they will tax you because of straight income tax and various other taxes. So you're going to lose a bunch of money to the IRS in terms of income tax. So now that you've paid your taxes, you have a lot less money, and you can take that money, whatever money you have left after taxes, and you can distribute that to your shareholders. You can distribute that to your shareholders. So now your shareholders have that money, okay? Or what's left of it. But they also have to pay taxes as well, too. So after they've paid their taxes, your shareholders get a tiny portion of whatever that subsidiary was worth, when the IRS gets most of that money in taxes. So, does this seem fair to you? Does this incentivize anyone to actually sell their subsidiaries? Well, turns out that Congress didn't think it was fair, and so they issued ways for you to be able to sell it in a way that most of the money doesn't wind up in the IRS. So George Pelicaris made a statement. He said he wants to capture the maximum value for every shareholder. Okay, and at that time he was talking about the Series A preferred shares, which is the MMTLP shares, or the Metamaterials Torchlight preferred shares, right? So it is possible to spin out in a non-taxable event, right? And there are methods for doing that. And when you do that, neither the distributing corporation nor its shareholders recognize the gain or loss on the distribution. Basically, one method of doing that is with a sponsored spinoff, right? With a sponsored spinoff, you've got a parent company, and they sell a minority stake in a unit to a private equity buyer. And we call the private equity buyer the sponsor, of course, right? And then the parent company distributes the remaining interest to its shareholders, to its stockholders. According to the Internal Revenue Code, the sale by the company of newly issued stock is not taxable, and the spinoff will not be taxable if you follow certain complicated tax requirements, right? And it's all listed out in Rule 355 of the IRS Code. Now, I'm not a tax expert, and I'm certainly not going to go over Rule 355 of the IRS Code. You can check it out if you like, but if you don't follow those rules, you'll, as you saw, you'll wind up paying a lot of money in taxes. Now, the key here is that the parent company has to sell a minority stake. So minority means, less than 50%. So 49% would classify as a minority stake, right? So anything less than 50% is how much they have to sell. They have to keep 50% or more, right? Now, Roller Pigeons has gone over this info. She's the one who discovered this. So check out her videos. She's got 2 videos about this. She's done a good job. So congrats, Roller Pigeons. Thanks for the info. And if you haven't seen her videos, check them out. So this is a situation I think that we could be left with after the spinout, right? As long as you're following Rule 355 for the tax-free spinout in the IRS. You'll have Oilco, which is which used to be a wholly owned subsidiary, but it's its own entity, right? It's got the oil and gas assets, the management team, and working capital. It's all spun out in one company, and we think that'll be sold to a company called NextBridge, right? And they can buy up to 49%. So they'll have up to 49% of Oilco. And let's just say that if NextBridge owns 49% of Oilco, that means that the shareholders, the MMTLP shareholders, will have the remaining 51%. So that's the way that splits up. But they'll also have some cash, and that cash will be from the sale of that 49% to NextBridge, right? So they'll have the dollars that NextBridge spent in order to get that 49% stake in Oilco, and that's a situation that you'll probably be left with at the end of the spinout. Now, Metamaterials won't have Oilco at all. It will have divested itself from Oilco, so Oilco will be its own separate entity. Metamaterials will be able to focus on its primary goal of making nanotech and nanotech IP and licensing nanotech IP, that kind of stuff, right? So how much would this spinout actually be worth? What could MMTLP shareholders expect to get? What's it look like? Well, I did a calculation before of what those oil and gas assets might be worth. And I think it's worth it to revisit the calculation, and I'll just go over it. Okay. Let's start with the price of oil. We know that the price of oil is around, for WTI, West Texas Intermediary, it has been around $87 lately. Let's just say they get $85 for it, for the price of oil, right? Let's try to make the numbers easy. Now, it costs about $25 for any U.S. company to pump oil out of the ground. That's called the COGS cost. So when we subtract $25 from $85, we get $60. That'll be the gross revenue, right? Now, if you haven't pulled out all the oil out of the ground yet, and the oil is still in the ground, according to Texas A&M, you get about 12% value for oil in the ground. So that means that $60 per barrel of gross revenue actually works out to about $7.20, because you actually haven't pumped it out yet. Now we know that the Oilco, which is the oil and gas assets from Torchlight, that Torchlight had a 49% revenue interest. And so that $7.20 gets multiplied by 49%, and that brings you down to $3.53 per barrel of oil. So there are 3.2 billion barrels of oil, we believe, in the ground. Multiply that by 352, and we get $11.289 billion. Take out the corporate tax of 21%, the underwriter fee of 10%, and you're left with about $7.79 billion. Okay, divide that across 165 million shares of MMTLP, and you wind up with $47.23 per share. Okay, now that's for 100% of Oilco, but you're not going to get the cash for 100% of Oilco. You're only going to get the cash for 49% of Oilco, because that's the amount that was sold to NextBridge. And that's what NextBridge paid for. So you'll get the cash for that, and the cash for that works out to about $23.14. Okay, so we can expect to get about $23.14 of cash and 51% stake in Oilco, right? So you'll get Oilco shares, and you'll wind up with $23.14 in cash, if it works out in this potential scenario of a spin out, right? That's one possibility. So let's ask the question. Suppose we were to take that $23.14 and reinvest that back into metamaterials. What would happen? Well, there's a calculation for that we did a bit earlier. Let's say that all of that cash that comes out for the for the sale of 49% to Oilco is about $3.8 billion. So if only 25% of that cash got reinvested back into metamaterial stock, you're talking about reinvesting back about $954 million, or close to $1 billion. Okay. So we know that at a $1.75 per share, that you can purchase about 545 million shares. But there are only 188 million shares available to buy. Okay. The way I came up with 188 million is that you have 281 million shares that were issued, of which insiders own about 50 million shares, and institutions own about 41 million. So subtract the insiders and institutions from the total shares issued, and you get 188 million shares. So with your $954 million, you are attempting to buy 545 million shares, of which there's only 188 million. So there's not enough shares to buy. You're short by about 356 million shares. If only 12.5%, not 25% of the money from the sale of Oilco went back in, you're still short by $84 million. You're still short by 84 million shares. You don't have enough shares left. And even if 9% went back in, you'd be short by about 7.7 million shares or so. So somewhere around the 8% point is when you'd have enough shares, and then you'd be able to buy what's left. But that's only if 8% went back in. But if any larger amount went back in, then looks like there's not enough shares to go around. So let me just repeat. Let's see. So there's not enough shares to go around. But don't forget, we were only talking about the 49% cash that you would get back. You've also got Oilco shares. And what are those Oilco shares worth? Well, we know that people have been predicting that in 2022, oil will hit about $100 a barrel or more. I believe Bank of America indicated that oil would hit about $120, $125 per barrel in 2022. I think JP Morgan was closer to the 125 mark. And JP Morgan also said that by 2023, they expect oil around $150 per barrel. So with oil being $150 per barrel, how much would that 51% stake in Oilco be worth? Well, I put a calculation in that, I repeated the spreadsheet, but I did the calculation at $120 per barrel. And that means that the value per MMTLP share of Oilco, of the Oilco shares that you have, would be around $38.14, right? So you take your $23 that you got in your cash dividend, you take the Oilco shares, which have a valuation of about $38, let's just say. That means you've got in total, you're getting the spinout will result in you getting a value of about $61 and that's for one equivalent share of MMTLP, right? So I'd say that's capturing the maximum value for MMTLP shareholders. So if George Palocaris did that, that would be a good job. So $61.28, maximizing shareholder value for MMTLP. So that's all I have to say. Let me end the video by saying that I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. So, goodbye.